Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Non-Clinical Collective. My name is Mike Asbach, and I'm the co-founder of the Non-Clinical Collective. And I'm here with my other co-founder, Aaron Block. Aaron, good morning.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm great. So this is our first podcast and video. We're actually going to be posting this in the Non-Clinical Collective community. Our goal is to stimulate conversation and eventually do more of these and maybe even include members, include guests. But our goal today is just to have a conversation and really chat through not only what we are doing by starting the non-clinical collective, but then also, Aaron, I think we've got a good conversation coming up for us. Is
Yeah.
there the value of a boring job? Do you want to maybe give a couple thoughts on that and then talk about the non-clinical collective and then we'll dive right into it because I want your thoughts on whether we should stay or leave. It almost sounds like we're talking about a bad marriage. If you're at a boring job, what do we do? Before we get into that, I want to give you a chance to talk about the non-clinical collective and how do you think it's going so far?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and so we wanted the first kind of podcast here to be light, right? We're not diving into like the nuances of a non-clinical resume or something super technical. This is kind of a light conversation and one that's meant to be fun. So, yeah, talking about what defines a boring job, whether or not it's worth staying at or moving on from, I think is a fun starting point because it can go down so many different avenues. But to speak to the non-clinical collective, I think it's a culmination of like several years of me and you having this sentiment where there's more to our degrees than taking care of patients. And taking care of patients, I think, is something that we both value and have had a lot of fulfillment from, but it doesn't have to be like the end of your career. And we always kind of give this analogy of lawyers who graduate law school. They don't have to litigate. They don't have to do that one stereotypical job and role that you think of when you think of a lawyer. There's so many different types of law. And just like law, there's so many different positions within healthcare. And so the non-clinical collective is here as a free resource to address to give people an idea of what's out there, and B, to arm them and to empower healthcare providers with every tool that they could possibly need to find the right position for them within their current lifestyle, within their current family situation, and within their career goals. Find the right career that's going to fulfill all those needs. So we started about 2 months ago. Hold me to that. I think it's about 2 months.
Sounds right. Yeah.
And yeah, I think we're approaching 200 members. We get new additions every single day. There's some great discussion going on. And I think that's only going to be kind of compounded as we get more people kind of on board with this mission.
Yeah, I agree. And I think so far it's been great. We have, as you said, nearly 200 members. I think the exciting thing though is we're very much bootstrapping this. We're not spending money on advertising. I don't know about you, but I'm sometimes tempted. I'm like, what could we do with some Facebook ads? But it's been really great to see the growth of people that are interested and are finding it through word of mouth or through our channels. So we're going to continue to podcast. I know that when this podcast was White Coats at the Round Table, we tried to do weekly podcasts. And one of the reasons that John and I were looking to make a change and eventually partnered with Aaron is because weekly podcasting is hard. It's a lot of work, and taking time to edit the videos was a lot. So we will have a presence. We will do these types of conversations. I don't know what frequency. We're going to kind of do it when it feels right. But my hope is that for those of you that may not be part of the non-clinical collective, maybe you're listening to this because you subscribe to our podcast feed. Maybe you've just stumbled across it on social media. Check out the non-clinical collective on Circle. It's a free community, as Aaron said, and our goal with it is not necessarily to charge you, but rather to provide resources and really become the single point of access for education, but also next steps for PAs or NPs, other allied health professionals that are looking to jump into the non-clinical space. So with that, Aaron, let's talk about today's topic. So I just want to spend not a ton of time, 15 or 20 minutes, and just get your thoughts on the value of a boring job. And I want to preface this a little bit of why I love this topic. So there's a book that I read a while ago last year, and it's actually a great one. Maybe I'll even post it into the community. It's called Good Enough. And it talks about achievement culture, or I'm sorry, never enough. And it talks about achievement culture and the toxicity of that. And I think healthcare is so representative of toxic achievement culture, where there's this mentality that we always have to be grinding. We always have to be doing that next thing. There's always this next thing that we have to do. And I think that's in part why we see so much burnout, because there's no like, hey, I'm comfortable I'm competent in what I do. I'm a good clinician. I provide high quality of care. Mission accomplished. I'm going to go enjoy golf. I'm going to go enjoy some other hobby. But rather, there's always this feeling of hierarchy or inadequacy where there's always something more that we have to do. And I'd love your thoughts because to some degree, I think that that's good. We don't necessarily want to get complacent, especially in a field of medicine where patient outcomes are a big part of it. But at the same time, I think complacency or having a boring job can be really good for our mental health. So I guess I'll pause there. I want to hear your thoughts, and then maybe
Yeah.
we can kind of give some back and forth because I've jotted some notes of my arguments on both sides, the pros and the cons. But I'll let
Yeah,
you give
no,
your thoughts.
it's a really interesting topic. I mean, I think a lot of us in healthcare are highly motivated individuals, and so we're overachievers. Where a lot of us are Type A. We did well in school. We want to first and foremost feel a sense of self worth, and we get that through helping people. And so I think a lot of us have this natural strive to continue to do more. But the problem with healthcare is kind of when you get good at a job, like you're just supposed to repeat that job
Hmm.
indefinitely, just with different, rinse and repeat with different patients. And you can continually learn, but the job itself doesn't change. And I think that's what gets a lot of people stuck. And they're like, well, I'm not really doing anything different here. And so they get this grass is always greener type of approach where they're unfulfilled because they're just kind of rinse and repeating. And again, I think that to some degree that's healthy because you want to always be able to develop professionally. You want to always be able to, learn new things, but and it may take a new job to get you to that new role where you're learning and pushing yourself. But a boring job, the best part about being kind of what I call in cruise control, where you're maybe still very busy, but you don't have to put a ton of brain power into it, is just where it can meet you in your stage of life. So like the best example is like for the first like 6, 7 years of my career, if you told me like work 70 hours a week, stay in the OR till 10 p.m., like I would have like happily done it. And I did that a lot. I worked weekend shifts, picked up call, like all sorts of crazy things, just because like I was seeking that adrenaline, seeking sorry, my computer wants me to restart. No, remind me tomorrow. So I was seeking that adrenaline and like the extra knowledge. As soon as I had kids, like my desire to do those things changed. Like, my priorities in life were significantly altered. I prioritized being at home a lot more. And so then a job that was like 8:30 to 4:30 where you can, know when you're going to sign off, if you have to miss a day because a kid's sick, not having to cancel 30 patients in clinic or, leaving your surgeon without a first assist, like those kind of things became so much more valuable to me. And so the idea of having this, like what I would call boring job where it's very predictable. It's easy to plan around. It's a very steady emotional state as opposed to this like peak and trough adrenaline. That's been so valuable to me as a parent. And maybe when my kids, are off more independent in middle school, high school, in college, I'll want some of that adrenaline and unpredictability back in my life. But for now, like I'm seeking kind of the steady state. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. The way that I think about this is in healthcare, boring probably also means competence. Is that you said it similarly. If we're in a job that we find to be not overly rigorous, it's not stressing us out, that probably means that we've achieved some level of competence in that role. I was actually just having a conversation with a fellow colleague, and I said it probably took me 5 or 6 years to get to a point where I wasn't really stressed or terrified going into clinic because I felt like, oh my gosh, am I going to make the right decisions? Am I going to do the right things? And it's a great reflection that medicine is absolutely built on experience, right? In a physician setting, they have residencies that are highly controlled environments where they grow in their graduated but supervised autonomy. PAs and NPs are different because we get turned out loose without a residency, and our scope of practice is going to evolve and grow with time. And I think that's an important distinction, right? We never want to equate physicians with PAs and NPs because the training model is different and there's going to be evolving scope of practice for both. But if I've reached a point where I think my job is boring, that probably means that I've seen the majority of stuff that you see in clinic, because you're right, 80% of our day is going to be stuff that we see day in and day out. I've probably reached a point where I have a pretty high level of competence with those day to day routine things. And that's not a bad place to be. I think about it. There's days where I see 30 patients in clinic, and there's some days where I get stressed by it, but a lot of times the stress is not the clinical workload. It's, if something didn't work right operationally or something else is going on. But even when I have the busiest of clinical days, typically it's pretty smooth sailing. I can flow through that. I don't get stuck in a room with a patient because they're talking for 45 minutes and I don't want to be rude. I feel like I've learned a skill set to be able to navigate the visit, keep the visit within the prescribed amount of time without the patient feeling that they're cut off. Those little skill sets that take time to build. So I think competence is really an indicator of boring, or boring is an indicator of competence. But the other thing that I think comes with that is I'd love to hear your thoughts on identity diversity. So, obviously, mental health clinician, I always like to look at this through the self care psychology lens. And I think we all grew up, I don't know about you, we all grew up in this era of Grey's Anatomy as millennials that we watched Meredith Grey give her entire life to the hospital. We watched all of these people, in TV or even just in books, whatever it may be, in school, our professors telling us that healthcare is a calling and that we need to sacrifice ourselves at the altar of our patients. And to some degree, you have to, right? You were just describing 10 p.m. OR times, and obviously there's going to be missed dance recitals, there's going to be missed family events because of healthcare, and that's just part of the job. But at the same time, I think that if we have our entire identity wrapped up in who we are as a provider, I'm a PA and that's all I am. That's not good, because then if the job is going great, I may feel wonderful. But if the job is going poorly or if I have a bad day at work, my entire identity, my entire social circle is also tied to that identity as well. So I think a boring job is not a bad thing because it allows us to drive that identity diversity instead of being, hey, I'm Mike, I'm the PA that works at, it's rather, hey, I'm Mike. I really enjoy hiking, or I've got four amazing kids. I've got a great family. And it allows us to maybe de emphasize the role of our profession in the broader scope of who we are or what we identify as meaningful and purposeful in our life. So I'd love your thoughts on maybe identity diversity within this.
Yeah, and I think some of it may just be generational, right? Like I think my
So much. Yeah.
parents' generation, like it was kind of a live to work scenario, and now it's like a work to live scenario for a lot of us where, I just think priorities have changed a bit, from the boomers to the millennials and the Gen Zers, where it's like now, like, leaving an employer after 2 to 3 years is totally normal. Whereas, like, my dad stayed at the same job for like 50 years or maybe 40 plus years. So, there's that shift, I think, culturally, where your identity is not so much wrapped up into what you do and your title and more kind of, yeah, your passions in life and the things that you enjoy. And then there's the whole like, FIRE movement, the financial independence, retire early, where people are truly like prioritizing their financial independence so that they don't have to work beyond a certain age. And then they can, live this kind of alternative lifestyle, which I'm not saying I'm a proponent of necessarily. It's a huge sacrifice early in life. And I loved living my 20s and early 30s the way I did. But yeah, no, I think there's a shift. Just technology allows us to learn more, to experience more, and to apply to more jobs more easily. So it's just not the same. You're not defined by your job nearly as much as you used to
Mhm.
be. Yeah, for better or worse. I think there's something kind of like peaceful with like how my parents lived their life, where it's just like, okay, like there is no grass is always greener or situation. It's just here, like, this is a good job, I'm gonna stay, I'm valued, like, and that's what it comes down to for me. Is it's like, where are you feeling valued, and where can you kind of be at peace with your job? And I think you mentioned stress, and I think that's a big point where it really, like, if you're looking for a boring job, it depends on how you define boring. Like for me, my job is what you would call boring because it's a very predictable job. There's not too much dramatic escalations where I'm super stressed. I do have to present and things, which is all part of a normal non-clinical role, but there's not the stress that you have in clinical medicine, which certainly makes my job less exciting on a day to day, but it's no less intellectually stimulating. So it's kind of a nuanced definition of boring. but I'm definitely learning more on a day-to-day basis now than I ever have in clinical medicine, where it's more about implementing what you have learned than it is about actively pursuing new projects and new initiatives. So yeah, it comes back to me for definition, the definition of boring.
So that's a great pivot. So I want to pivot this because we've talked primarily right now about the value or defense of a boring job. But you make a great point there, because even though you self-describe your job as boring, what you describe is also what appears to be very intellectually stimulating. So I like the parsing of the definition, where boring maybe doesn't mean a bad job, but boring just means a job that's very predictable and is not necessarily exciting from an adrenaline standpoint. It's not Grey's Anatomy. I want to flip over and talk a little bit about the arguments for leaving a boring job or for trying to find something different. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. Is we live in a world where our identity is, like it or not, very often tied to our career. And yet at the same time, we live in a world where we don't stay at a job for 40 years and build those deep social connections. I think about my dad, similarly, has been at a job for decades, and he has friendships, he has connections through that are there, that if you're jumping from job to job every 2 to 3 years, you lose some of that in terms of your social connection and your social fabric. I just said I think that's actually a net positive. I don't want all of my life tied into my job. I want to be forced to kind of diversify that. So I think it's a good thing. But the flip side is it's putting more reliance on you to actually find that identity diversity, and maybe don't people don't find it. But I think it's really important for us to have jobs that stimulate us. And my worry on the other side of this is that if you have a boring job, maybe you're working at a college health center, and an average day you get two or three people that come in and there's just not a whole lot going on. That sounds like a very cushy job. And for some people that may be glorious, to just work at a college, work with young, healthy kids, have very little clinical workload. Me personally, I would be bored out of my mind. I would be crawling the walls, and it would not be good for me, because I need to have a job where I feel like I'm constantly challenged, where I'm constantly learning new things. And healthcare is an industry where there's no shortage of those jobs. It's not like we have to settle for a boring job and lack that cognitive stimulation, because there are so many opportunities to find that. Maybe you work in ortho, and after a couple years of just doing knee replacements over and over and over again, you want to try a different role because you want to go learn a different procedure. I think that's a really fun part about being in healthcare. And also as PAs, obviously our lateral flexibility gives us a lot of opportunity that some of those other health professions don't have.
Yeah, so I agree. You know, and that is the main thing for me is like, no matter how predictable a job is, if it's not passing the day quickly and allowing me to feel like I've learned something new, and that it's that I'm adding to high quality healthcare in some capacity, like I'm not going to survive there. So yeah, like, I think boring, again, the definition can be so nuanced, where if you're just at like an urgent care clinic as a clinical provider and there's no one coming in, like you're just going to be dilly-dallying on your phone for 8-hour shifts. And, that's a bad type of boring. There is a
That's
good
not
type of
hell.
boring. There's a good type of boring where, again, I kind of mentioned that cruise control, like you earn that cruise control where, after a number of years of experience, it's not that it's easy work, or that there's no one coming in to, see you as a clinician. It's that you've kind of earned your stripes, and that, you can do it with your eyes closed. That makes you feel good because your stress levels go down, your anxiety goes down about not knowing what to do, what labs to order, or if you're in the non-clinical world, like, how to present something, or, how to connect with stakeholders. So you have to earn that competence, like you mentioned. But I agree. I mean, like, no matter what setting we're in, if, like, again, we're type A, where healthcare providers are intellectual individuals, and if they're not stimulated and challenged, kind of pushing slightly out of that comfort zone to continue to learn more, it's just not going to be a good fit over the long term.
Yeah. I think no matter what, as humans, we do well if we're in a state of constant intellectual curiosity. I worry about this a lot because I think social media has put us in a position where when we come home from work, or when we have downtime, instead of reading a book, which is an active mental activity, we very often are doing passive mental activities, scrolling our phones, watching Netflix. And I worry that over a couple generations is going to basically snuff out this intellectual curiosity, wanting to learn more, wanting to be curious about the world, find out new information. But a boring job doesn't necessarily have to equate to the loss of intellectual curiosity. Maybe that intellectual curiosity is about something different, gardening or something else that builds your passion. But I think the key is to find that. So maybe one of my takeaways, if we want to think about some concluding thoughts with this, Aaron, is if you have a boring job, that's okay. All of healthcare doesn't have to be super exciting. All of healthcare doesn't have to get our adrenaline going. It's okay to have a boring job, especially if you're at a phase of life where maybe predictability, work life balance is more valuable to you than pay or excitement. But at the same time, if you feel that you're in a role and you just don't really enjoy what you do, and it's something where it's not fulfilling you, it's not giving you a sense that you're mattering, it's also okay to try and find a different role. There's no right or wrong answer here. I think the key for me, once again, putting my psych clinician hat on, is to just do some self reflection and figure out, do you feel that this is boring because you're unhappy with the role, or is it boring because you've achieved a level of competence or mastery that is actually a signal that you can now shift your focus, that intellectual curiosity, towards other things in your life that are going to also bring you meaning and purpose?
Yeah, well said. I think your career, what it comes down to is your career is a multivariable equation, right? And so you just have to weigh which variables in your stage of life are most valuable to you. Is it time, like work-life balance? Is it compensation?
Mhm.
Is it your intellectual, thirst? So you just got to figure out kind of what is most important to you and how you can capitalize on that in a particular role.
I think that's a great place to end. So,
All
what a
right.
great conversation, Aaron. I love this. My hope with this community is that we can continue to have these types of high level conversations, not just you and I. Obviously, this is what started the idea for this community, but also everybody. And my hope is that we can do so in a safe space, but in a place that's off social media, that really gives people the feeling of comfort to kind of explore and figure out what they want in their careers. So many times on Facebook in these PA groups, we see anonymous posters and they'll say, not happy in my job, but I may have coworkers in the group. And that's really what we're hoping we can get around, is finding a place where everybody is there because they are at least interested in non-clinical roles, in how we can do more to further our career, even if that's outside of the clinic. And I think these types of conversations are a big part of that. So thanks for spending some time with me this morning. And I'll give it to you in case you have any final thoughts before we sign off.
Yeah, no, this was a great kickoff. And yeah, I'm just really excited to see where the non-clinical collective goes. I really think in just a few short months of collaborative discussion and, free resources for folks, we're going to see a lot of success stories where people say, hey, thanks so much. I was stuck. And with some simple guidance and conversation with like-minded folks, I've now found a really great pivot in my career that's meeting me where I need to be. So I'm excited for that. I think it's right down the pike, not far away. And so I encourage everyone to spread the word and, invite your friends to this conversation.
Perfect. All right, everyone. So we're the Non Clinical Collective. Check us out on Circle. If you Google the Non Clinical Collective, you'll find it. Otherwise, if you're not following our social media feeds or our podcast feeds, certainly give us a follow there. You can always leave us a review. This is one of the ways that people can find us. Otherwise, Aaron, have a great day.
Signing out. See you later, Mike.